you'll overlook it because you realize he's under pressure if he gives you back your pizza and your soda. And he did that, and he got thrown out again. And he said, now what are you going to do about it? I'm not going to do anything. I said, but you can give the guy a second chance to be human about his error. I said, call him on the phone and say you'd like to speak to him, and I'll be your witness. And he did that, and he got hung up on. And he said, now what are you going to do? And I said, write this fellow a letter and send it certified return receipt. That'll only cost you 65 cents in those days. I don't know what it is now. I said, give him a chance again to recognize that you can't treat other people that way. And so we did that, and then he said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm not going to do anything, but for $4, you can sue him in small claims court. I said, and you're going to win hands down because you have 3 sets of evidence that you acted like a reasonable person. And I said, and I can testify to 2 of them, and this return receipt will testify to the 3rd in the letter. And he did, in fact, get awarded triple damages. And I'm looking at a headline here that says, Pizza Palace sued. 13-year-old wins case in first court appearance. He was awarded triple damages. I think that came to $13.05. And 1 week later, Brooklyn College Law School called and asked if he could come and lecture to the law school. And that was rapidly followed by, I think, every law school in the Northeast. This boy wasn't illiterate, but he was close enough to it. In a very, very short time, in a year or two, he was unrecognizable because he had been recognized as a person of value by people on the outside. Anyway, they're different things for different people, Barbara. But I think in all cases, it requires some kind of solitude, some time alone, somebody not wiping your nose or picking up, but saying, here, I have faith that you can do it. Here's the time.
Yes. You are listening to John Taylor Gatto, school teacher and friend to hundreds of New York City children. Stay tuned to New Signals on KPFK Los Angeles at 90.7 FM. A parent himself, Gatto reminds us that caring for our children once came naturally.
I think the millions of people who are destroying children's lives, and I hesitated, but I used the word advisedly, don't really want to do that. Mm-hmm. I think given some acceptable alternative, they wouldn't do that. But in fact, they don't see an acceptable alternative other than spending more time or investing more of themselves imaginatively and physically, and it's a price that we're taught that only fools pay.
Yes. You know, I just spoke with Joseph Cornell, who is, we'll call him a nature educator, and he said that his parents made raising him and his brothers their first priority in life.
But it can be your first priority not as a duty, but because where else can you get a responsibility as really glorious and interesting as that? I don't think there are other raw materials quite as fascinating. I believe that most of the human race dimly understood this for most of human history. It took a long, concerted effort by industrial interests to convince people that doing that was agonizing, and the best people only did it out of a sense of duty or occasionally out of some mild amusement.
But today, many parents are doing what untold generations of people did naturally before the recent invention of compulsory schools. They are raising and educating their children themselves. Far from being threatened by their commitment and enterprise, teacher John Taylor Gatto applauds them.
It's awe-inspiring. First of all, the performance of the kids on instrumental measures is so staggeringly better than it is from the schools. And I'm not talking about the kids in the schools who have trouble, but the best classes.
Yes.
I mean, most of these kids I see by the time they're teenagers who've been self-educated at home, mm-hmm. and with their parents' assistance are so much more mature and insightful and relaxed than I am that I always feel that I should be raising my hand and asking them questions. 2 weeks ago, I was in Toledo, Ohio, to make some some speeches. And I stayed at the home of a homeschooling couple who wouldn't at all mind if I used their name. Their son, who's about 17 now, had been homeschooling himself for the past 4 years, with his parents' cooperation. Andy Ensley is the kid's name, and a lot of your listeners will have seen Andy because in his 4 years of homeschooling, which I guess we'll have to call it, in his 4 years of homeschooling, Andy has managed to talk himself into the cast of the movie Glory, which an awful lot of people have seen about the Civil War, talk himself into the cast of Dances with Wolves, which a lot of people who are listening must have seen. And when I got to Toledo, he had just returned from 5 weeks in Montana with his mother and father and his sister. But they really, I think, went out as chaperones. Andy had been asked to speculate with his time, making a 10-minute movie sample that someone was going to use to raise money for a Western movie. If the money were raised, then Andy would have a major part in the film. Now, you'd have to see this kid, how sober and serious he is, how much a scholar of the Civil War, which is one of his interests, he is, how practical he is, because he runs a silk screening business that does 10 or 20,000 silkscreen bags at a time. You'd assume that he was absolutely a grown man by his maturity, his curiosity. Even his appearance is that of a serious person at a serious time in human history.
Perhaps among these self-reliant and resourceful young people who are not schooling but educating themselves, we will find the inspiration to let go our reliance on professional experts, political dogma, and corporate agenda for what Gatto calls the lines of meaning in our lives.
Isn't it true that the only people that can teach anything are people in the white heat of learning themselves? Now, I'm talking about education. You can train somebody in some simple operation and know that operation inside out yourself. But if you want someone to become educated, what you have to do, it seems to me, is to awaken their mind to the passion of discovery. And you don't do that by memorizing things and giving them back on a test.
Heeding his own advice to master new challenges, John Taylor Gatto threw away his most successful lesson plans. He refused to lean on what he knew. Perhaps that is what moves him now to leave Manhattan for life in the country. He will soon try his hand at nurturing other living things as a garlic farmer. John, may garlicky sauces simmer in your kitchen, and may you live happily in the house you build yourself, or don't. Whichever way, I'll be watching.